this computer. Hello, everyone. This is Will Harold, the Energy Hunter, coming from the Rogue River in Southern Oregon. We're with Akashic Intelligence, the original AI, where all information and knowledge is stored, and that's how we can actually become more aware of source and where our true inspiration it comes from, as Walter Russell would say, is in the knowing. Today, we're going to cover Alice Bailey. Again, we're on rule 4 now. There are 15 rules of white magic, so we'll be going through each one, probably another 11 weeks in which we're talking about each rule. And today's rule is rule 4, so I'll go ahead and read it, and then I'll talk a little bit about the images that I have on the screen. So for rule 4, it's sound, light, vibration, and the form blend and merge, and thus the work is one. It proceedeth under the law, and naught can hinder now the work from going forward. The man breathes deeply, he concentrates his forces, and drives the thought form from him. So with that, the images that I got from the reading were, of course, Walter Russell, right? When we look at this diagram here of the cosmic pendulum with the inhalation and exhalation and the 0 point, this is really what Walter's work was focusing on also. And as you see this, he has the law, he has the cosmic pendulum, he has the magnetic, the electric, the gravitation and the radiation going in equal but opposite directions. And so Walter was focusing on the cosmic pendulum in a sense of the inhalation, the 0 point, and then the exhalation. And that's a little bit about what Bailey is covering here in this area about the breath work. We also talk about sound and light have corresponding. And if you watch the universal octave video I did on Walter Russell, we go quite depth into how all these correlate together within the universal octave and how this is how we manifest. Walter Russell says that the foundation is love, but the manifestation is in light. And we're going to cover some of that within Bailey's work also. So within these images I have here, below here, we have Walter Russell's image of the cube sphere, as we talked about, how all things come into form and into being with the cube and the sphere. And then we have a little bit here of the breath, right? This is kind of a Native American or even South American, Mexican view of the breath coming forth. This is a picture of like God, as in the Bible, where it says how God breathed the breath into man and he became, conscious. And then what I have here is actually an image from the book of Ezekiel with the wheels within the wheels and the eyes within the eyes. And we're going to talk a little bit about the wheels within the wheels and the eyes within Bailey's work. And so I wanted to bring that forth because this information is not new. It's been known for a long time. It just really hasn't been interpreted quite right. And we've been, told that there's different reality than what it is today. So as we go into this, be sure and concentrate on the words sound, light, vibration, form, and the breath, because those are really the keys to this manifestation. And the one reason that I kind of went into Bailey from Walter Russell is because Walter speaks a lot about the science. He speaks about how the wave works, waveform, mechanics. Bailey talks a little bit about how to achieve that, what kind of state of mind we need to be in, and how we can actually maybe help to have more of a group, and community that can actually begin to work together and find some real power and manifestation together as we work towards this collective consciousness that we're trying to achieve in this new age. Any comments before I move on to actually talking about the slides that I've put together from the book itself? All righty. So we talked about, we read rule 4. I'll read it one more time. Sound, light, vibration, and the form blend and merge, and thus the work is one. It proceedeth under the law, and naught can hinder nor the work from going forward. The man breathes deeply, he concentrates his forces, and drives the thought form from him. So as we move forward here, on the Treatise on White Magic. This is the creative work of sound, the science of the breath is the title. First, the rule we are at present considering concerns work on the mental plane. As many of you know, that there are different planes. They're called different things in some different systems. Within Ibrahim Karim's work in biogeometry, he called them the planes of nature. In theosophy, they're called, their own planes. And the mental plane is, our mind, how we think, what we kind of our discernment, and how we make sense of our world. And we can get caught up in the mind. Walter Russell talks about how we have to distinguish the electric mind, the mind of the body, the mind of the animal, from the mind of the conscious man, which is actually given to us through source. And so we have to make a differentiation between those two. Alice Bailey calls it the solar angel, which is kind of the mediator between source and our straw man, or our personality, as she calls it. So we reflect. In the other three rules before this, we were talking about how to engage with the solar angel and then reflect on the personality, and then begin to move our soul into our current manifestation. And as we talked about, the difference between white magic and dark magic per Bailey is that white magic comes through the soul and dark magic comes through the personality. So as we begin to concentrate on the soul and concentrate on that mediation with source, we begin to create a magic that is from a higher, more divine purpose than just meeting our basic animal needs and instincts. So it's from the mental plane, and before such work is possible, it is important to have a developed mind, a well-nurtured intelligence, and also to have achieved some measure of mind control. These rules are not for beginners in the occult sciences. They are for those who are ready for magical work and for labor on the plane of mind. Love is the great unifier, the prime attractive impulse, cosmic and microcosmic. But the mind is the main creative factor and the utilizer of the energies of the cosmos. Love attracts, but the mind attracts, repels, and coordinates so that its potency is inconceivable. This is what Walter Russell called, the omniscience and omnipotent and omnipresence. It is not possible dimly to sense a state of affairs in mental realms, analogous to that now seen in the emotional. So we're talking about, the different planes here, the mental realm, what we'd also call the etheric realm, and so on. Can we picture the condition of the world when the intellect is as potent and as compelling as the emotional nature at this time? The race is progressing into an era wherein men will function as minds, when intelligence will be stronger than desire, and when thought powers will be used for appeal and for the guidance of the world, as now physical and emotional means are employed. Any comments before I continue on of what we just read in regards to the mental plane, the emotional times that we're going through right now, and this progression of our consciousness that Bailey is talking about, that we probably are seeing more? Well, you have to realize that, Bailey was around during the Second World War. She saw what was happening. There was quite a time of world upheaval and things going on too. We're not seeing that in the exact, we have a war in Russia right now, but we don't have the whole world at war. We do, but it's not as evident, I think. It's not as that we have, armies facing off against others, but we do have agendas that are in place that are causing war. So any comments before I move on?
Yeah, I have to confess that second line, where an intelligence also has achieved some measure of mind control. I'm a bit of a scatterbrain.
Mm-hmm. That's fine. We'll hopefully help you get into that more.
There's a lot of quote unquote like Chinese here and understand.
Yes, it's dense work, that's for sure. So as Bailey says, there lies in this thought a profoundly necessary incentive for a right understanding of the laws of thought and a correct instruction to be given of the use of mental matter and the building of that matter into thought form. These rules concern themselves with this information. The second necessary recollection is the worker in magic, and the potent entity wielding these forces must be the soul, the spiritual man. And for this, for the following reasons. 1, only the soul has a direct and clear understanding of the creative purpose of the plan. 2, only the soul, whose nature is intelligent love, can be trusted with the knowledge, the symbols and the formulas which are necessary to the correct conditioning of the magical work. Only the soul has the power to work in all 3 worlds at once, and yet remain detached, and therefore karmically free from the results of such work. 4, only the soul is truly group conscious and actuated by pure, unselfish purpose. 5, only the soul with the open eye of vision can see the end from the beginning and can hold in steadiness the true picture of the ultimate consummation. So within these are the 5 kind of, areas that rules that concern themselves with the information of how we actually begin this manifestation in the mind, how we can control the mind in terms of not letting it just run, wild. Walter Russell would call that, like the instinctive mind. I need to eat, but when eat turns into gluttony because we think we need so much, that's when the mind begins to have, the starvation mentality, the lack mentality, and we begin to feed our senses. So, we may enjoy love or sex, but then that turns into avarice and so on, and lust. So the mind just wants to keep feeding itself more and more because it has no control. It's what some people call it the hungry ghost. We don't know what it is that we need, but we just think we need more. And we have no control over what this body is saying because it just wants to keep, being in control. And that's what, Bailey would call the personality. Now, as we begin to look through the soul, those needs are somewhat satiated, and we don't concentrate so much on the needs of the body. This kind of gets back to the Jungian idea within AA of that alcoholism is a spiritual malady. Now, that's just a constant desire to drink and not really looking at the body just begins to crave the alcohol, and it actually begins to take over. Other spirits also can enter, but it is, at base a spiritual malady. So any comments before we move on to her summation of this work? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to interject in place of the soul that we start thinking, because we can direct our consciousness to it, that the heart space is where that is. And that's honoring the intelligence of the heart too. Then the heart is way more intelligence than this thing. In mitosis, it forms first, right? It builds the brain with the gut. And so a big part of what I'm about with heart math is including all 3 intelligence, the gut, the heart, and the brain. And this is really what needs to be in coherence through the vagus and the endocrine system, with the pituitary in front of the pineal. And I'm wondering if Walter speaks to the trinity of the mind, or really the quaternity, with the reptilian, the limbic, and the cerebral cortex as it relates to the pineal gland. Does he differentiate that, or is it just mind is mind?
Well, that's when I was doing the study and we were on mind, that's what I actually got into a little bit more, because Walter's has a very kind of simplistic view of the mind, or at least that's how he discusses it. I'm sure he probably, he didn't really explain it well, but when we talked about it in the Secret of Light group, when we were studying the book, we actually talked about the eye of Ra also. If you cut the brain and do a section, you look at it, you actually see, what you're talking about, right? And it's the resonant chamber or the thalamus, and so on. And yeah, but no, Walter does not really get into that deep. Like I said, most of his work, where he has a chapter on cosmic consciousness and he has a chapter on the New Age, he doesn't really get, most of the book is on the mechanics of the wave and not so much about how to get there.
And that's all good, because we're here to kind of refresh and redefine and bring it into contemporary thinking or feeling, so I think that that's all important. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Any more before I finish up with her conclusion of these rules? All right. So it says, you ask whether a worker in black magic possesses not an equal power. I answer no. Again, this is Bailey saying no, not myself, but I answer no. They can work in the three worlds, but they work in the plane of mind and do not function, therefore, outside their field of endeavor, as does the soul. They can achieve from their proximity and identification with their working materials results more potent temporarily and more rapid in accomplishment than the worker in the White Brotherhood. But the results are ephemeral. They carry destruction and disaster in their wake. And the black magician is eventually submerged in the resulting cataclysm. Let us therefore remember the necessity of correct use of the mind, and at the same time, let us ever hold a position beyond and detached from the creative work of our minds, desires, and physical accomplishments. So again, she's kind of reiterating what I talked about between the black and the white magic, as she calls it. And as we move forward, these are the concepts and precepts that we should actually really hold on to so that we differentiate ourselves from black magicians. Okay, so now she's going to move away and start talking about the creative work of sound. So 4 words stand forth as one considers rule 4. First, sound, the formula or word of power, which the soul communicates and so starts the work. This word is dual. It is sounded forth on the note to which the soul responds. His own peculiar note, that means each of us have a peculiar note that we have, where we resonate differently, we form a song, blend with that of his personality. This chord of 2 notes is the producer of the resulting effects and is more important than the set phrase composing the word of power. Now, Bear talked a bit about this, about each organ has 2 polarities, and we only actually use one of them, but we can actually see without our eyes. And when we see without our eyes, we actually see a much clearer picture. And there's people who can read, say they can read, with their eyes closed. I know that when I was doing martial arts, that was one thing that they tried to have us do, was to be blindfolded and to actually begin to see without our, eyes, and actually just to feel the energy and the movement and the wave around us, and begin to feel, the Akasha at work, and kind of within the medium that we're in, begin to feel those vibrations. So what we're, talking about here, there is the soul aspect, and then there's the physical body aspect. So the physical body aspect would be our, our physical eyes. And then that soul aspect would be that other polarity in which we can function in, but we're never taught that. Any comments before I move on?
The sound, own peculiar note. I think it takes a while to actually discern your own note, like actually reaching the causal body, being quiet to be able to turn that, because that's important, because that's how, well, you will create what what you're meant to.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, when it says that, it's not the most easy, that's, to discern that. That's one of the things, like to be able to discern your soul versus some other, I'll say noise that you're hearing around, messages or something.
Yeah, go ahead, Cosmo.
Yeah, I just like to add like the fingerprint, and the ringing in your ears in terms of frequency. That those are important to trying to connect to the corporal real, right? Because this expression of the mind is really important to how it connects to cranial nerve pairs, what these really are, in terms of the bones, because this is a lot of stuff that I get into in terms of Adam Kadmon, that the sound, the primordial sound of Om, fundamentally is related, and this is microvita, 10 vowels, that those are all toroidal. And that's the part that I don't see in Walter's work, other than the vortexes, but how the toroid interfaces with the geometry. That was all. But yeah, the fingerprints, this is really important because it relates to water, frozen water, and the snowflake, that every, and this is geometric in the cube, every snowflake is hexagonal, but every snowflake is individual. And that's kind of what we are, and then why water is so important to all of this. And Walter Russell was a fan of primary water, and I'm very big in primary water, which a lot of people don't have context for. That was all. Thank you.
Anybody else before I move on? Okay, so herein lies the problem. To sound these two notes synchronously and with the mind focused. Here lies a clue to the significance of the Om or Om. In early stages of meditation work, the word is sounded audibly, whilst later it is sounded inaudibly. This training in the sound of the Om is an unconscious preparation for the dual work of spiritual creation. And facility comes as the attentive aspirant, that's you guys, accustoms himself or herself to hear within his brain the soundless sound of Om. I would suggest here that students accustom themselves to work in this manner, sounding the word audibly and with much frequency at the close of the morning meditation, but emphasizing in the early part that close attention to the inaudible hearing, which will develop the sensitivity of the inner ear, the etheric ear. Later, when the personal note or sound is established and the inner sound is sensed, there can be definite practice in blending the two. This entails the closest attention and the power to perform two activities simultaneously with the mental attitude of attention to both. Students whose aspiration is keen and clear would do well to face the issue where the magical work is concerned and study their aptitude in meditation and their willingness to proceed with stability and caution with the needed discipline. To facilitate this, I would suggest that any who are deeply concerned in the work should study and answering the following questions in the light of their souls, and to their highest selves make reply. Number one, do you feel you have reached the stage where you can, A, eliminate the meditation from you as you now have it, enter with relative facility into the state of contemplation, and C, recognize the vibration of your soul? Two, does a sacred word mean anything to you? And could you formulate clearly the reason you sound it? Are you anxious to proceed in this work because your personality aspires, or because your soul is beginning consciously to utilize its mechanism? In connection with the last question, a close analysis is called for, and I conjure you to speak truth to yourself and thus clearly ascertain the true position. The question lies between a man's soul and himself. Any comments on what we just read regarding this creative work of sound in the Om? So, you know,
I would just add that Om is 369.
Mhm.
Fundamentally, that's what it is.
And as we look forth with, you know, this idea of sound, you know, this is what Walter Russell covered quite a bit in his work, and then we get back again to the universal octave that we talked about. As we as humans find our own notes, and then we begin to create a symphony, not a cacophony, we can begin to manifest what it is that we desire from the soul, and actually it's achieve the heaven on earth that's actually discussed, and heaven in heaven also. Okay, so the use of the sacred word has its place also in the magical work of the hierarchy. Thought forms are created for the embodiment of ideas. and this embodied forms are sent forth to contact the minds of the disciples who are responsible in the group of a master for the carrying forward of the plan. Now, I'm not saying I'm a master. I'm saying this is what he's basically saying. I don't know if we have a master, but I think that as a collective, we become the masters. But the idea is that as we begin to congeal as a group and begin to work this magic, we can then begin to actually manifest in a different way than what we currently do. Sometimes I think Bear actually talks about how the weather is actually reflective of the consciousness that we have, and when we have this consciousness of fear and scarcity and anger and war, our world's turbulent. It's very, very turbulent, and if we don't want the turbulence, it's probably a better idea to begin to concentrate and meditate on the ideas of love, compassion, and we might see our world change. I know we will. I mean, we will see our world change. I'm already seeing it, just in some of the work we've already done. And so, within Bailey, and the reason that we're doing this study is that these are the methods, and it's one method. I mean, there's probably others, I'm sure, but this is one method to get started with that we can actually begin to create this cosmic consciousness in a community type setting and begin to discuss these concepts and because it's nice to have a group, because each person, male, female, whatever their background is, we talked about this a little bit, whatever tribe they're from, whatever part of the earth they're on, is all going to have a different view, and to share those views so that other people, on the earth, in the world, and other spirits that actually may actually be listening in too, can actually begin to hear these other perspectives and begin to embrace those as well, and maybe see it from a different perspective that they didn't, therefore creating new geometries and new ways of understanding. Any questions before I move on, or comments? Okay. Through the cultivated receptivity of the developed and controlled mental body, aspirants become aware of the ideas which the masters bring through the plane of the universal mind, and hence are in a position to cooperate intelligently. They, in their turn, as this rule seeks to indicate, create thought forms of those received ideas and utilize them in their groups for the helping of the world. The main work of a disciple on the mental plane is to train himself to do 4 things: to be receptive to the mind of the master, to cultivate a right intuitive understanding of the thoughts sent to him by the master, to embody the ideas received in such forms as will be suitable for those he is engaging to help, through sound, light, and vibration, to make his thought form active, embodying as much of the universal thought as is desirable, so that the other minds may contact it. There are many other uses, of course, but if the student will ponder on these 3, they will make it possible for further uses to be imparted later. This is, may I add, this is Bailey, not myself. May I add that the sounds, it is only truly potent when the disciple has learned to subordinate the lesser sounds. Only as the sounds he sends forth normally into the 3 worlds are reduced in volume and in activity, as well as in quantity, will it be possible for the sound to be heard and so to accomplish its purpose. Only as the multitude of spoken words is reduced and silence in speech is cultivated, will it be possible for the word to make its power felt on the physical plane. Only when many voices of the lower nature and of our environment are silenced, with the voice that speaketh in the stillness, make its presence felt, only when the sound of many waters dies away in the adjustment of the emotions, will the clear note of the God of the waters be heard. As evolution proceeds, and again, we're not talking about man to monkeys, we're talking about the evolution of the spirit, okay, that there's a process that goes on. This is a law of evolution that Walter talks about, which is we are either in a state of, ascension or descension, right? And we don't really have stasis. So if we choose one, it's same as in business. A business is hard to keep in a stasis position. It can either be growing or it can be shrinking, but to keep it in stasis is an impossibility, actually. So this is the law of evolution. As evolution proceeds and the human family rises into a true position in the great plan of the universe, right and correct speech will be increasingly cultivated, because we shall think more before we utter words. Or as a great teacher has said, through meditation, we shall rectify the mistakes of wrong speech. And the significance of our word forms that we put forth, true and correct sounds, and vocal quality will become ever more apparent. That's a lot to unpack there, but really good, deep stuff. Any comments on what we just talked about?
I really like that part about as the sound of many waters dies away, adjustments of our emotions, like our astral body, that will clear the clear note of the God of the waters. It seems like, you see, when our emotional body is very calm, that's when we can truly reflect what we're reaching, like what we're like, like the knowing, or, we'll get a clearer picture, So right now we're being tested, that's for sure. And yeah, that part about the uttering, like, less word. Yeah, that's something hard to work on for me anyway.
By design. I'd love to speak to the word part of it, because that's a big part of what I do in terms of neuro-linguistic programming, and what the antonym, synonym, homonym, contronym really represent in Babylonian terms is, and I don't know how we do this in terms of truly understanding how we speak to each other, but understanding etymology of words, roots, and most importantly, the Pi root of a word. The Proto-Indo-European root is so critical to moving forward, like the word nice and smart. If you look those up, they're not what you think at all. And look at how many things we have that are smart. Smartphone, smart meter, smart grid, smart city. There's a reason for all of that. But these are fundamentally what words are cubes. They're thought forms. And we can't have a thought that we don't have a word for. This is why the heart is so important, is because the heart doesn't use words, right? The left-right paradigm of the bicameral mind is always trying to talk you into and out of something, but it's using words, right? And so that's a really big, but getting deeper into the number part of it is words are made of letters. Letters are numbers. And so this is where the magic really comes in, is understanding the magic of numbers, because that's where it comes from in magic squares and magic hexagrams that I don't hear anybody talking about. But it's all related to astrology too. All of this stuff is kind of like the code is what astrology is to the cube. The tarot deck, all of that, it's all speaking to the same 12ness, the 12 construct. That all of this is really, it's all fundamental, but until we really understand even what letters are in terms of the tetrahedron, which this is the cube, right? This is the Star of David. This is where it all comes from, but those letters are inside fire, right? They're called fire letters. And this is all Hebrew stuff. And I'm really broad, guys, in terms of my studies, right? I don't have, Walter Russell's just one of very many gurus that I have. But all of this stuff is interrelated to that aspect of, in the beginning was the word, right? What the Bible's speaking to. And he said, let there be light. So you know that sound is primordial. It comes before the light. And the words, right, are where the sound come from, because we speak through the words. And Krishnamurti had a quote, when you teach the child the word bird, they never see the bird again, right? To really embrace that and what he's trying to say there in terms of what the bird is relative to words, in terms of perspective. But yeah, so I can go so much into so much of this that I will, yeah.
It's great though. I mean, I love the discussion and the insight.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm thinking of what you just said about the bird. That's why in the Waldorf school, for example, where my daughter went, you know, they do all their own books. So if it was a bird, I guess they'd be drawing a bird, or they'd be, you know, experiencing in nature. So it wouldn't be so much the letters as, you know, flying or the colors. So everything, even for mathematics, or everything was to, well, rhythm or sound, or, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So it depends how we started, and yeah.
We got program.
Steiner very much was a big influence on Frank Chester and the Chesterhedron. So anthroposophy is along with theosophy, right? They're all very critical in everything that I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
But definitely Rudolf Steiner is the man in terms of the core essence of what I'm speaking to. And again, he was, you know, the Theosophical Society. That's a big part of the cyclical aspect of where I come from with numbers. What they really are is cycle. But that's through music.
And we've talked about that in the past, is that Steiner did spend 12 years as the theosophical leader in Germany before he actually started anthroposophy. So he is deeply rooted and has a deep basis in what Bailey's talking about her, because she also has a root in Blavatsky and theosophy.
Love it. Has anybody here heard of something called the Strader machine, which is a Rudolf Steiner?
No.
Because that one, I only recently came across it, but it's definitely worth searching, because I'm looking at it as a core of everything I'm doing within the breath of the compassion. Really, that breath of the compassionate is, in Sufism, is all of this. It's all piezoelectric and it's all flux, right? But it expands and it contracts through itself. The inside outness of all of this is what the hypercube is really about, that I also don't hear a lot about from Brasilians.
How do you spell Strader? So people that are listening.
Strader.
Strader. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to move on to the second word. Second word of importance is this fourth rule is the word light. First the sound, and then first effective sound, the pouring forth of the light, causing the revelation of the thought form. Light is known by what is revealed. The absence of light produces the fading away into apparent non-existence of the phenomenal world. The thought form created by the sound is intended to be a source of revelation. It must reveal truth and bring an aspect of reality to the cognizance of the onlooker. Hence, the second quality of the thought form, in its highest use, is that it brings light to those who need it, to those who walk in darkness. Then here's Bailey saying, I, not me, I deal not here with light as the soul, cosmically or individually. I touch not upon light as the universal second aspect of divinity. I seek only in these instructions to deal with the aspect of truth, which will make the aspirant a practical worker and so enable him or her to work with intelligence. His or her main work, and increasingly he will find this to be so, is to create thought forms to carry revelation to thinking human beings. To do this, the work occultly and through sound of his breathed forth work, through the truth revealed in form, will he carry light and illumination into the dark places of the earth. Any comment or discussion on what we just read regarding light as the second and bringing forth this truth is what we're talking with light also, and that our purpose as aspirants or participations in reading this book and in this group is to carry light and illumination into the dark places of the earth. All right. The sound reverberated amidst the bearing wheels of uncreated matter. And lo, the sun and all the lesser wheels appeared. The light shone forth amidst the many wheels, and thus the many forms of God, the diverse aspects of this radiant robe blazed forth. If you can remember in the picture I set forth from the book of Ezekiel, you kind of see this happening. The vibrant, palpitating wheels turned over. Life in its many stages and in its many grades commenced the process of unfolding, and lo, the law began to work. Forms arose and disappeared, but life moved on. Kingdoms arose, holding their many forms which drew together, turned together, and later separated, but still the life moved on. We have touched upon two words of significance in the fourth rule: sound and light. And one paramount idea emerges. The soul is to be known as light, as the revealer, whilst the spirit aspect will later be recognized as sound. Complete light and illumination is the right of the disciple who attained to the third initiation, whilst the true comprehension of sound, of the triple Om, the synthesizing factor in manifestation, appears only to one who stands master of the three words. And I put down here a little quote from Ezekiel 1:16, where Ezekiel had a vision when he was on the banks in Babylon, when the Hebrews were put into captivity in Babylon. And Ezekiel talks about the appearance of the wheels, and their work was like unto the color of beryl. And they four had one likeness in their appearance, and their work was as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. So we're actually getting some imagery maybe here of, Ezekiel looking into the realms of the spiritual and actually seeing these wheels. And if I go back to that original, to the image that I'd put forth here, these wheels within wheels, and kind of this idea of the throne and so on. Again, like I said, these are not new concepts. They span, many different systems. The truth is out there in all these different systems. Some interpret it differently, some are interpreted incorrectly, right? But this is nothing new. It's been around for millennial, and so as we begin to embrace this, we actually are taking part in that grand tradition, right, of understanding these occult and deeper aspects. Any comments on the creative light of work before I move on?
When they talk about wheels, I think of in astrology, when you start, I guess if you have a crisis and then you think, well, I want to, I don't know, change my life or whatever, you start, you have a connection to the soul, and then you're going the reverse of the wheel, okay, of all the signs. So, and so that's like how you come home. So I think of the wheels that way, but also in the spine, our chakra, as we develop, you can think of them as wheels, and they start turning a different way. Like if we could see it, like if we had that, some people do, some people that have no auras or see, they can see, well, they turn on itself, but they also turn, like, they'll have colors and stuff. That's why I think when I look at wheels as well. So
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that, because that really is the astrology is the 12ness, and that wheel really is if you look at the face of the clock, that's what time is, right? To really get that part of it is called the epicycle, but it's a matter of transferring information from the center to the circumference as information is transferred. It's a simultaneous process, and it's through the relationship of one half, which is musical in the semitone. Very powerful stuff to really get wheels or circles or spheres through a 90-degree relationship, right? That 90-degree is everything in terms of octaves. What the L is for, it's the 12th letter in the alphabet. There are zero coincidences in this matrix, folks.
Exactly. And last week, when Paula, I don't know if you remember Paula talking about the gal that was at Music and Sky, her name was Nikki Page. And when she sang, she could hit all the different pitches and everything, but she didn't ever really have any formal training in, say, Russell or physics or anything. But when she sang, she saw a clock, and that's what she saw. She didn't understand why she saw it, but she knew that she saw that, and that as she would sing and bring in these notes and bring this, into reality and into formation, she was actually accessing this knowing that we're talking about and seeing what she didn't know, but that knowing was there, right? It was deep. And so I asked her, have you studied Russell? Because what you're talking about sounds very much like a Russellian. She didn't, ever read that, but she saw it. And so it just shows that we don't need to learn some of these things, but these are innate in us as long as we can actually access them. And through music and sound, it's a great way to do that. All right, so I'm going to move on from light to the next one. So the creative work of vibration. The word vibration must next engage our attention, but it may not be dissociated from the next word in the sequence form. Vibration, the effect of divine activity, is twofold. There is the first effect, in which the vibration, issuing from the realm of subjectivity in response to sound and light, produce response in matter. Back to our 3D now, in the matter, and therefore attracts or calls together the atoms, of which molecules, cell, organisms, and finally the integrated form can be built. This effect, the aspect of vibration, is to be noted as a duality. All that is lacking in the developed spiritual body, which is equipped to respond to the vibration of the inner spiritual world, it exists in embryo, and the secret of its use lies in the attitude of the brain to the functions of the etheric body, as it exists as an intermediary between the brain, nervous system, and the mind, or between the soul, mind, and the brain. This cannot be elaborated here, but the hint can be given from the reflection of the keen aspirant. We have therefore the following stages dealt with in Rule 4 and pointed out with lucid clarity, yet with the parsimony of phrase which distinguishes all occult and symbolic writings. The integration of the form as the results of the activity of the soul through the use of sound, light, and vibration. The development of a response apparatus for use in the phenomenal world. The eventual turning away from the phenomenal world as a result of use and constant satiety, and the gradual use of the subtler response apparatus. The response apparatus of the soul, mind, etheric body, brain, and nervous system is reoriented, and the man becomes aware of the kingdom of the soul, another kingdom in nature. The turning away from the kingdom of the world to the kingdom of the soul becomes an esoteric habit. And in this lies hid the secret of esoteric psychology. The man is stabilized in the spiritual life, can now hinder. Any questions or comments on that beautiful concept? So as we're talking here, we're talking about these three, sound, light, and vibration. We see this in the wave. We see this in what Walter Russell speaks of. We see this in reality. And now we're actually beginning to talk about manifestation, right, in the 3D world, into matter. And as we call this, the phenomenal world, right? Man, as we begin to focus on things that are not of this world, right, that are of soul, and as Walter Russell calls it, the cause and the effect. So what we're talking about now, we're actually looking at cause, right? We begin to see life as cause, not as effect. And one of the problems we have currently, right, in our materialistic scientific mindsets is that we look at effect and not cause. And then we try to see the effect and explain the cause, rather than understanding the cause and they're actually really seeing what the effect is. And as I believe, as we change our perspective and begin to look at the cause, we will then change the effect we experience. And that's what's being talked about here also. And again, we did a lot of work on this. If anyone wants to go back to some of the work we did in The Secret of Light, we did quite a bit on, the ideas of sound, light, and vibration within Walter's work, and how that was actually into these waveform mechanics that he talks about. Anything else before I go on to the breath? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just in terms of emotion as cause and the relationship with the heart is really where I see cause is generated, because this is our connection to source.
Mhm.
The heart receives source, but what gets out has to go through the astrology first,
Mhm.
and it has to go through the language first, right? So that's really what gets projected out, is not what we feel, because I call my work the color of emotion, right? Because energy and motion is essentially what emotion is, but that's what I see as a real cause is our connection to source energy, through which we project a distorted version, because everybody's feeding into that collective energy that we perceive, and then we project out what our spin on it, right? That's why eyewitness testimony proves that we all see things a little bit differently, but it's all the same thing generally. That's what I see the cause. And I just want to keep going back to the heart, because I really think that that's critical, that we, again, consciously connect with that space, so that we're putting that cause in here and not somewhere where we don't really know where to place it, is all I really want to do there.
And I think in rule 2, we talked about the heart quite a bit more than we are now. All right. Now, the creative work of breath. Now we come to the significant word in rule 4. The man breathes deeply. This is why don't we all just take a nice big inhale and hold and put it out. So let's 1, 2, 3. Inhale. Exhale. There we go. The man breathes deep. This is a phrase covering many aspects of rhythmic living. It is the magical formula for the science of pranayama. It covers the art of the creative life. It sweeps a man into tune with the pulsating life of God himself. And this through detachment and reorientation. There is the aspect of inhalation. The man breathes deeply. From the very depths of his being, he draws the breath. In the process of phenomenal living, he draws the very breath of life from the soul. This is the first stage in the process of detaching himself from phenomenal living. He draws from the depths of his being and experiences the life that it may be rendered again back to the source from whence it came. In the occult life of the disciple, as she develops a new and subtler use of his response apparatus, he practices the science of the breath and discovers that through deep breathing, including the 3 stages of deep, middle, and top breath, he can bring into activity in the world of esoteric experiences his vital body with its force centers. Thus, the 3 aspects of deep breathing cover the entire soul experience, and the relationship to the 3 of breath touched upon above can be worked out by interested aspirants, which are us. Before I go on to this next, any comments on that so far as the breath and the 3 aspects of the breath? And this is very similar to what Wim Hof practices. He doesn't really correlate it back to the pranayama concepts, but a lot of what he is doing is within the pranayama concepts of the breath and the focus on the breath. And I think we were talking a little bit about the limbic system. Some people have heard some of my earlier videos in which we talked about Emanuel Swedenborg, in which he did this kind of breath work also back in the I think it was the late 1700s, and kind of came up with the limbic system. He actually was probably one of the first aspirants of this idea of, spiritual psychology, in which Jung actually picked up on and gave Swedenborg credit for that within the archetypes and other things that Jungian psychology grew from. Next we read, he concentrates his forces. Here we have the stage indicated, which can be called retention of the breath. It is a holding of all the forces of the life steadily in the place of silence. And when this can be done with ease and with forgetfulness of process through familiarity and experience, then the man can see and hear and know in a realm other than the phenomenal world. In the higher senses, this is the stage of contemplation, that lull between two activities, as it has been so aptly called. The soul, the breath, the life has withdrawn out of the three worlds, and in the secret place of the Most High is at rest and at peace, contemplating the beatific vision. In life of the active disciple, it produces those interludes which every disciple knows, when through detachment and the capacity to withdraw, he is led by nothing in the world of form. He is held by nothing in the world of form. As he is but wrestling toward perfection and has not yet attained these interludes of silence, withdrawingness, and of detachment are frequently difficult and dark. All is silence, and he stands appalled by the unknown and by the apparently empty stillness in which he finds himself. This is called, in advanced cases, the dark night of the soul. The moment before the dawn, the hour before the light streams forth. In the science of pranayama, it is the moment following upon inhalation, wherein all the forces of the body have, through the medium of the breath, been carried upward to the head and concentrated there. Prior to the stage of breathing forth, this moment of retention, when properly carried forward, produces an interlude of intense concentration, and it is at the moment that the aspirant must seize opportunity. Herein lies a hint. Any comments on this? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to draw the parallels with the heart and the lungs as it relates to the breath, and more importantly, the anode cathode of oxidative stress that is part of Walter Russell's work. But the inverse relationship between trees and our lungs, and how the branches of our lungs are the branches of the trees. What we breathe out, it breathes in. What it breathes out. So it's a referential cycle to really get, because that's what the universe is it's not just expanding, it expands and then it's going to contract. Well, that's where we're at right now, is we're at the extremes of the masculine phase, the polarization, ready to make that inversion process back to the feminine, where it's back to bringing to a birth, right? Because the masculine polarizes, the feminine unifies and rebirths. And that's the whole process of what that breath is the four causal forces of inspire, aspire, expire, respire. Spire is spirit, right? Spirit is angels, and angels are numbers.
And then,
So it all rotates, right? And this is really key in what the breath and why it's so important is that's the first thing you take when you enter the matrix. It's the last thing you take when you leave it, right? To really get that, the primacy of the breath is, yeah, that's all.
and like I said, I've talked many times, I do practice Wim Hof method. And when you first start doing it, if you want to get present, I always say, if you want to get present, hold your breath, right? Because all you think about is the next breath. And a lot of people get real scared when they start doing Wim Hof. I'm like, what are you scared about? You can always breathe, I mean, they think they're going to suffocate or something. I said, you're in control, all right? But once you actually get to a state where you're not thinking about holding your breath anymore, when you're not thinking that you're holding your breath and you're worried about dying, you're worried about how painful everything is, you kind of just settle down into it. I can feel myself settle down into my heart. I mean, that's what I find is it's almost like my heart's this big cushiony thing that I just kind of fall into like a big marshmallow. And when I start doing that, then the thought of breathing and my next breath just goes away. And I just begin to really experience the now. And it's like you're in a different dimension. You're in a different space, totally. You're really transmuted into an area where now growth can occur, and all the other things, you're not thinking about breathing, you're just experiencing. And so, that's what they're talking a little bit about here, is that when you lose that tension, when you lose that, fear of breathing, and you can actually just hold your breath for a while and forget about that. Then you take that next inhale, you're bringing that life back in, right? You're bringing that, you have this new purpose and new vitality that you brought in from the universe. All right. So then after we hold our breath and we breathe in, and then we exhale, and then comes the process of exhalation. We read in Rule 4, he drives the thought form from him. This is ever the result of the final stages of the science of the breath. The form vitalized by the one who breathes in correct rhythm is set forth to do its work and fulfill its mission. Study this idea with care, for it holds the secret of creative work. In the life of the disciple, through meditation and discipline, he learns to reach high moments of interlude whenever he concentrates his forces on the plane of soul life. And then again, by an act of his will, he breathes forth his spiritual purpose, plan, and life into the world of experience. The thought form that he has constructed as to the part he has to play, and the concentration of energy which he has succeeded in bringing about, become effective. The energy needed for the next step is breathed forth by the soul and passes down into the vital body, thus galvanizing the physical instrument with the needed constructive activity. That aspect of the plan which he has appreciated in contemplation, and that part of this general purpose of the hierarchy, in which his soul feels called upon to cooperate, is breathed forth simultaneously via the mind into the brain, and thus he drives the thought forms from him. Finally, it is the science of pranayama. This stage covers that exhaling breath, which, when carried forward with thought and conscious purpose behind it, serves to vitalize the centers and fill each of them with dynamic life. More need not be said here. Thus, in this science of breathing deeply, we have the whole process of creative work and the evolutionary unfoldment of God in nature covered. It is the process whereby the life, the one existence, has brought the phenomenal world into being. And Rule 4 is a digest of creation. It is equally the formula under which the individual soul works, as it centers its force for manifestation in the three worlds of human experience. The right use of the life breath is the whole art at which the aspirant, the disciple, the initiate work, bearing in mind, however, that the science of the physical breath is the least important aspect and follows sequentially upon the right use of energy, which is the word we apply to the divine breath of life. Finally, in the mental life of the discipline and in the great work of learning to be conscious creator in mental matter and so produce results in the phenomenal world, this fourth rule holds the instruction upon which the work is based. It embodies the science of the entire magical work. Any comments before we discuss this some? So within this, we're again talking about, the exhalation, right? And what part of within these three constructs of the Walter Russell. I'll go back to the beginning image that we had from Walter Russell, where we actually see the inhalation and the exhalation and the 0 point within this cosmic pendulum, right? And how we have the radiation and gravitation and the wave, which which in 3D will cause the vortexes to occur and will, create that to happen in that toroidal field that we've so much talked about, which the heart is. It is the toroidal field of the body. And from that, as we've talked about earlier, that's the first thing that is formed in the embryo, and that toroidal field then begins to spin and begins to collect, the molecules, and the molecules become the cells, and so on and so forth. And this is how we manifest. This is how our bodies are being manifested. And if one of my videos, I think one of the first ones, which I think I call the king priest archetypes, where I actually get into some things in biological ionization, some of the diagrams of the body, of how they talked about that, and how those two toroidal fields come together to actually form the body through, the elements that Walter Russell also talks about with the inert gases and so on, and how as those become congealed and become more and more solid, we begin to form as humans. And so we're holding this vibrational aspect of all these other intelligences within this form, because each of those aspects, as Bailey talks about, are intelligent, right? They are sentient beings also, and we're bringing those, we're calling those forth into us with our note, right? With our vibration, with everything that we are, that we've talked about previously. We're just bringing all of that in to a physical manifestation on the earth. And with our thought forms that we put forth, we can do the same thing to our exterior. We can bring forth these thought forms, as Bailey talks about. So we are finished with Rule 4. We're going to cover Rule 5 here next. Any comments to wrap up Rule 4, or any feelings that anyone's gotten, or experiences that we've talked about as we read through this work?
What I was thinking with continue what you just said about manifestation, when we reach we do this breath process, then when we breathe out, and the sound as well, we attract higher elements, if you like. So that's why the words or the actions we do can have I guess a more aligned impact with the law, you know what I mean? So that which comes back to the beginning of what it said at the beginning, like that the black magician, like they always have this destructive part in it, versus when you're aligned with the knowing, hopefully ours will have a beneficial effect, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we can see it out there, the forms that are disintegrating today, or the forms that no longer serve us, they're destroyed today, which, we're looking forward to that. And we want to reconstruct everything. So I'm looking to be able to construct something.
Yeah, and then what you just said kind of reminds me of allopathic medicine, right? It's a magic that works very quickly, but has very huge, back end effects, right? Those side effects that we talk about. So, it's oftentimes it's hard for people that are in advanced disease areas to wait on the time it takes for homeopathic or natural type medicines, because they do take time to actually produce the result. And if people have let it go for so long to where they need this sudden right fix, they might find temporary relief in allopathic medicine, but the back end of it is the side effects, and whatever gain they got, they will soon lose because of those side effects or that back end effects. And this is why it's always better, the best medicine is to, keep your body in shape. Look at the terrain theory, begin to actually build your body up, not only physically, but in all the subtle body areas, because, we've talked about those other things like German New Medicine, which believes, that the issues are in the tissues, right? We manifest them in our minds and in our emotional bodies. We bring them into the physical. And so as above, so below. What we manifest above will actually become manifest in this 3D plane of reality. All right. So now we're going to go on to Rule 5. We're going to just read it today. That's all we're going to do, but hopefully we can all meditate on it this week. And when we get together next week, we can actually discuss it and talk a little bit more about it. So we're leaving Rule 4, moving on to Rule 5. So Rule 5 states, 3 things engage the solar angel before the sheath of the one who thus creates, and steady contemplation thus are the heart, the throat, and eye, allied for triple service. So this is what we're going to discuss next week about the heart, about the throat, and about the eye, and how they are allied within the Trinity of themselves to engage the solar angel, which is what Bailey says is this mediator between source and the personality or the straw man or our avatar that's actually walking this earth. Because without this solar, without the spirit of God within us, the avatar, the straw man, whatever you will just fail, it will fall. Because what life is a spirit of source. So as we go into next week, let's contemplate that and meditate on that a bit. Use some of the things that we've talked about of the breath. Think about sound, think about light, think about vibration, think about these things as we meditate, and stop thinking about them and just experience them, right? Just become a being, not a thinking creature. But just try to experience those things. Go into your meditation with intent. So any more comments before I leave and sign off? All right. This is Will Harold, the Energy Hunter with Akashic Intelligence, the original AI from the Rogue River in Southern Oregon with the Secret of Light group. They're always a pleasure to be with. And if you like these, please like and subscribe and watch some of the other videos. If this was over your head and you felt like you were swimming, there's quite a bit of information with the Walter Russell. There's also many other videos I've done regarding these same topics from different perspectives. But please watch those if you'd like, and you might get a better handle. I know that one of the best videos that I have out there is the Universal Octave. That's one of the highest viewed videos I have, but it explains a lot of the Russellian things that we're talking about here. Also, the video on the inert gases speaks a lot about this that we talked about. So please watch those. Please like and subscribe, and please comment so I know that what I'm doing here is speaking to everyone. So with that being said, we will stop this recording and